Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another episode of our Theorycraft Thursdays. This is episode 4, and the topic of today is Desperate Defense, which is the new signature card for the newest general to Total War Elysium, King Priam. And King Priam was added about a week ago, and he has a very interesting playstyle that was covered in our very first Theorycraft Thursday when we talked about structure decks with Agamemnon, which was the first of the Greek generals. And now that we have King Priam, he is officially the leader of the structure deck movement in the meta. And that's because his signature card, Desperate Defense, is perfect complement to a structure deck, as it will give any targeted allies +2/+2 until the end of turn, and it will also stun that ally. So you would not be able to use this extra stat on the ally for offensive purposes, but for many of the structures which are not able to attack, the extra stat boost for just one supply is magnificent in keeping them alive as a strong defensive line, as the title of the card would suggest, with Desperate Defense. Now, King Priam does have a lot of different playstyles available to him, in that his card, Desperate Defense, can work well with a multitude of combos with existing cards. And actually, recently, Creative Assembly actually put out a blog post introducing King Priam. So let's first take a little bit of time and go check that out. So here we are on the CA blog, and we have Total War Elysium, King Priam of Troy. And we're not going to read through the whole thing, but we're just going to generally touch base on what the design philosophy is for King Priam, and relates a little bit to his historical past, as he was the ruler of city of Troy during the Trojan War. And at this moment he was already old and thus a bit weak, which plays into the fact that he has 0 attack and only 15 health. But Priam was a lucky man. He had many children. I think there are accounts where he had about over 80 kids, with many of them taking part in the Trojan War. So you can rely on those kids as part of his playstyle, and we'll cover that once we finish up this blog post and go back to our Theorycraft Thursday. So first up, he is facing off against Agamemnon's Achaean fleet, and that's why Agamemnon was introduced first perhaps. And because he's defending Troy, it makes sense that he is specialized for defense and also specialized for structure deck, as the city of Troy itself was his strongest tool in overcoming the Greek forces, which had to siege the city for over 10 years before taking it down. And if we look at what he does in game, he's primarily a defensive general. He's weak in combat because his combat's non-existent at 0 damage. And he's the antithesis of fast and aggressive generals like Lagatha and Sun Ren. But luckily for us, King Priam is actually the perfect counter for these aggressive decks as well, which you guys will see when we have a deck showcase on him later this week. So let's continue, and we can see how he is unique, and the topic of this Theorycraft Thursday is really about his signature card, Desperate Defense, and the combos you can pull off with that. So first off, this card is a target ally card, which means it's not target ally unit, or not target ally structure, or not even target ally generals. You can do anything you want with this card. So you can even target Priam himself, as it mentions here, and it provides a temporary stat boost, making you 2 damage and 17 health, which is actually super good in terms of general stat. Now, obviously you'd be stunned, but because the enemy is always incentivized to attack your general, as that's the way to win the game, they will fight you, and you can trade back 2 attack every single time. And if they don't have over 2 damage, then they're really not damaging you at all, because Desperate Defense gives you temporary 2 health that would disappear. But if you had only lost, let's say, exactly 2 health, it's not going to take away your 2 other health that was not touched. It will just disappear. So every turn, if you use Desperate Defense on Priam, you mitigate 2 damage basically, and you also have 2 attack to fight back in counterattacks. So it's actually quite strong. You can effectively tank through the first daybreak, because the important thing is, during every daybreak, Priam will add one of his 3 legendary children to his hand: Dialphobus, Cassandra, and Troilus. and each of them will only cost 1, and each of them are given a legendary status in the game, meaning they are very strong cards with very different uses, so there's a bit of randomness involved, but getting that first one is key. So you are waiting for your first daybreak, and thus Desperate Defense is something that you should consider using on Priam pretty much every single turn during the first daybreak to get him through that very weak and vulnerable moment, and then combo into some of these strong children that you have, and then potentially shift finally into a structure deck domination where you just simply outstat the enemy and you can hide Priam behind all these structures and wipe the enemy out. So how should he be used? Well, the most obvious way is to use the structure deck. They introduce cards like Citadel of Troy, which leads all your structure to attack the enemy during a daybreak, and that's kind of what got the structure meta started in the first place. And he is also good for control decks, or you could maybe combine the two a bit. So you have a bit of structure and you have a bit of control, and some part of his control deck is going to rely heavily on how you use Desperate Defense. And they list a bunch of combos here. And the combos they have are Armed Recruiters, Cyclops, Ferocity, Swarm Companion, Fireship, and Citadel of Troy. And for those of you who had some familiarity with the game, some of these cards are going to be pretty obvious. Armed Recruiters grant you extra recruit every turn based on his attack. So if you use Desperate Defense on him, he gets 2 extra attack, therefore you get 2 extra tokens. Cyclops will automatically launch its attack power at end of your turn to hurt a random enemy. So if you give him +2 attack, he's going to do +2 damage at end of your turn without actually attacking, so the stun doesn't affect him. Ferocity doubles your unit's attack, and if you give them temporarily +2, you'll gain that permanently when you multiply by 2, because you get another +2. And then when the Desperate Defense wears off, you still have +2 from the doubling. So Ferocity definitely helps here, although I feel like that's a very expensive and situational combo for just basically 2 extra attack, and maybe it's not that worth it. Sworn Companion takes on the attack of your strongest or highest attacker currently on the field, so you could definitely use Desperate Defense on someone to raise your highest attack, thus giving Sworn Companion a very high attack when you summon him. Fireship's also very interesting. It's a 1/5 unit that will automatically attack whatever the enemy plays when they play it, so it kind of guarantees a free attack when the enemy comes in. So if you can buff this card to 3/7 at end of your turn, and you can do this on turn 4 because Fireship only costs 3, it's a very good combo to force the enemy to not play anything on their turn 4. Because there's not a lot of things on turn 4 that would survive the 3 attack from the Fireship. And since we're using the card on the Fireship, the +2 health also helps the Fireship mitigate 2 of those damages on the counterattack. So essentially make Fireship a very good controlling mid-game card for Priam. And lastly, you can always buff the Citadel of Troy, which cannot attack on its own, but will activate a free attack during each daybreak. So if you could buff it before the daybreak, the extra damage would go through. And then this is the tease, and this is the reason why I'm showing the blog, because I could have shown all of this whether in a match or on the screen with each card shown, because it's going to tease us about some exciting cards that's coming, because we're getting a new general very soon. And this is a little teaser for the end of this video, because I actually know who the new general is already. So if you guys are curious, stay tuned for that. And that's it for the blog. Very short and sweet. Let's jump back into looking at some of the cards and some of these combos that I actually like to use with Priam in my current deck. So taking a closer look at the card we just mentioned, so this is actually my favorite combos for King Priam, and these were definitely mentioned in the blog post, and I agree with most of the blog posts, but I feel like some of the other cards, given their high cost or limited usage, I don't think they're going to be that useful for most Priam deck. And for the basic use of Desperate Defense is use it on King Priam himself. Your biggest weakness is you have 15 health. If you get bursted out early, it's game over. You do not want him to reach last gasp. So you basically only have 8 health to play around with. And most aggressive deck or even non-aggressive deck can reliably deal about 8 damage in the early goings before maybe day 2. So if you're waiting for your kids to come help you, you need to use Desperate Defense on King Priam ASAP. Put him on the front line, don't hide him. 2 attack, 17 health is very strong. That's pretty much a late game Marie Antoinette when she transformed into the revolutionary mob, because you get 2 attack and whatever health you have left from 20. So 217 isn't that different from 220, and late game revolutionary mob is actually quite strong. So having that 2 attack, especially early on, nothing that's 1 supply or 2 supplies can really trade into you effectively, and you can get some really good value off King Priam himself. Now, speaking of value, Armed Recruiter is also excellent value, but he's not that valuable compared to how we used him in Cao Cao's deck, where he also could heal us and provide us a ton of tokens. Here, the use is pretty much a turn 3 combo, where you would play the Armed Recruiter on the front line, and you would boost him with the Desperate Defense, making him a 3/4 unit. And because he has 3 attack, you will spawn 3 1/1 token creatures that are called recruits, and you can do this every turn, and you're pretty much spending 3 supplies for a 3/4 defensive unit that's stunned, and then 3 1/1 unit. So that's a ton of value, right? You spent 3 supplies, you got 3 1/1 unit, and you have Armed Recruiter that's 3/4 that the enemy would really want to kill, because if they don't kill this, then every turn the investment is 1 supply for you, but immediately 3 more 1/1 tokens for your board. Very, very powerful early on, and can control the game early on if you can draw this combo. And before turn 3, where you have the 3 supplies, just keep boosting King Priam. And the fire ship we mentioned in detail already when we were talking about it on the blog. And basically, fire ship has the unique ability to damage the enemy unit when they're deployed. So you don't actually need to be unstunned to do that attack. That attack will follow every time the enemy plays a unit, whether you're stunned or not. So boosting the fire ship, which only costs 3, to 3/7 with Desperate Defense for only a total 4 cost really helps you control the board. Because let's say I'm playing on the other side as your opponent and I see a 3/7 fire ship, whatever I play ends up dead, and the fire ship mitigates 2 damage. It pretty much encourages me to not play anything, and really helps waste my supplies, and also limits my development of the board, which would play into King Priam's favor as he build up his structures, which require quite a bit of combo. And buying time also helps you in the long run, because every daybreak we do get randomly added one of our kids, which are shown here. And we can see that Cassandra is this daughter of ours who had a love affair, I believe, with Apollo, as in Apollo was pursuing her, she refused him, and Apollo cursed her, as she now has the ability to see the future and foretell the future, but she's cursed where no one would believe her. And in the game here, because of her future telling abilities, we can grab an extra draw at the end of our turn. Now, this is not as powerful as a draw in the beginning of the turn, obviously, because you're not going to be able to use that card until the very next turn, or use the information to help make decisions in your current turn. But basically, it's a delayed effect. The card itself is amazing, only costs 1. It's a 1/3 body unit, which is pretty good. You can put her on the front line, give her Desperate Defense. She's a 3/5, which is very respectable for a total of 2 costs, and she will give you a draw, which means the enemy will be incentivized to hit her, and the 3/5 will return damage and help you clear the board. Deiphobus is one of the best fighters after Hector among your sons. He's a 5/4 for 1 cost, which by itself is a pure stat check. Just very amazing value from this son of yours. And lastly, we have Troilus, who is getting killed by Achilles in the art, as Achilles is getting up on him in a temple. And he is offering his prayers, and when he dies, or when he is shattered, which is his death, he will help stun every enemy. And even without this ability, it is still a 1 cost 2/2. And you get output some damage, and when you die, you stun all the enemy, which buys you another turn. And buying those turns to help you set up your structure and also to get more of your kids out is always useful for King Priam. So all three of these cards are wonderful, and all three of these cards are something you look forward to having. Now, not having control over which one at each daybreak obviously is going to hurt you a bit, but I find it hard to believe that you might just draw the worst one for your situation all the time, and you can save these in your hand for important occasions. Like Troilus is very useful to stabilize the board if the enemy has built up quite a big board and you're waiting to draw perhaps your demolition combo with your buildings to clear the board. It buys you time, very, very valuable to have. And speaking of some of the structures, you have very cheap options of structure that people don't realize that King Priam can do. And the whole reason why we're buying time during the first daybreak is we can pull off this combo during the second daybreak. And this combo is not just one Elysian stonemason and one stockade. This combo that I'm putting out here is actually something you save up during the first two daybreaks. You want to have 2 copies of Elysian stonemasons and 2 copies of stockade. And when you dump that on your front line, immediately you get 4, 5, 6 units that are structures on the front line. Sure, they can't attack unless you use man the wall, which makes them 5, 6 short range units on the front line, which is insane. But the enemy, unless they have range on the front line, or they have long range on the back line, or a cavalry unit, they can't touch you. No one in their right mind at 6 supply, which is the cost of this combo, is going to be able to trade into 4, 5, 6 walls. There's just no way. Now, they could obviously board clear you. The biggest weakness of Priam decks is regime change. Regime change will wreck your life. If you see the enemy have regime change, just surrender. There's no point to play. They have regime change and blot of the sun. You're going to build up your board. He's going to wait till you build up your board, and he's going to wipe you. And then the game's not fun at that point. So there is a big weakness and a counterplay to structure deck, which is great, but it does ruin some of your hard work, especially during these long control games. And lastly, we're just going to introduce some late game building options to get you excited about the deck showcase that we will have this weekend. And that's pretty much showing you the strong Trojan buildings or structures. We have Citadel of Troy, which will lead all your structures to attack the enemy general during daybreak. You have the Trojan Wall, which is a long-range unit during your turn for a structure, which allow you to shoot anything on the board. And during your opponent's turn, it will become a normal wall that's not range, because if you're range, you can't counterattack with your melee component. So it's melee during the enemy turn and range during your turn, and it's long range during your turn. So it's basically the best of both worlds. It recently saw a small nerf going from 10 health to 9 health, but it's still very amazing. And the fact that it costs 5 supply is a good thing, because if you're running demolition, the total damage you'll do to the board clear is based on the supply cost of your building. So 5 is better than 3 in this case. And speaking of 3, Shrine of Hephaestus is one of the best structures that you can save up in your hand and play together, because by itself, it's only a 0-5 structure. But let's say we play 2 of these at the same time, then each of them are 2-5, and everything else will get +4 on the board for that line. So very powerful to save up some of your structures. I think the worst mistake most Priam players make is trying to play out your structure combos too early, and they end up getting picked off one by one. What you want to do in the early game is to stall and tank with Priam and Desperate Defense, which is the whole point of this Theorycraft episode. Use Desperate Defense aggressively on Priam and use him to help you trade early on. You can lose some health. You can bring Campfire and heal him up later. There's many options, but you need to be able to have some sort of board control with your general early on. If you're just thinking about hiding him behind some walls from the start because he's 0-15, then you have already lost the fight. And that pretty much wrap up everything I want to talk about for Priam. And lastly, let's go back to that teaser. And we have this teaser image too for those of you who are in the Elysium Discord channel. The official announcement has already been out asking us to guess this general. And this general here is actually Penthesilea, one of the Amazons, and also going to be a Trojan faction, bringing along some more Trojan cards. And she is definitely going to be released along the September update. And she's also going to be a component of the upcoming Total War Troy DLC. So that kind of makes sense how the Amazon DLC for Troy is coming out in September, and we're getting a Amazon leader as one of the playable generals for Elysium in the September update as well. So you can also see some Amazon warriors in the background here. So that kind of confirms this guest. And the real reason why I'm 100% sure it's her, even though we have not seen her cover art for Troy yet, is because when they posted this in Discord, the file name is actually Penthesilea, so it kind of confirms that this is going to be Penthesilea, and we're going to get our third and probably final Trojan general. So there will be officially 6 ancient general now, 3 Three Kingdoms with Dong Zhuo, Cao Cao, Sun Ren, and now 3 Trojan ones, or actually Greek and Trojan Amazon. And we have Penthesilea for the Amazon, we have Priam for Troy, and we have Agamemnon for the Greek sides. And Penthesilea is actually historically killed by Achilles, so I wonder if there's a card interaction between her as a general card and Achilles as a playable legendary card for the Trojan factions. And she comes in during the Trojan War to help Troy, even though during King Priam's younger days, he actually fought with the Amazons and defeated Penthesilea, if I remember correctly. So that's kind of all the exciting news and buzz for Elysium for the week. And I can't wait to showcase my Priam deck this weekend for the deck showcase. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, bye!